we have a housing shortage in the state of California. In light of this situation, the governments want to make it easier and more affordable to build ADU, accessory dwelling units, for the homeowners. They can either rent it out or house more family members. You may be thinking about converting your garage into an ADU or build one in your backyard. If you have enough space, you can rent an ADU out, or you can live in an ADU to rent the main house out. Either way, you can start making money while living in your house. It's a great way to increase the value of your real estate. Before you do that, I want to mention something very important, but not a lot of people know about. It's rent control. Hi, I'm Ava, a local realtor here in San Jose, California. Welcome to my channel. California has very strict rent controls. Depending on where your property is located and when it was built, your property may be subject to either state or local rent control. At local level, rent control usually applies to properties that were issued a certificate of occupancy before a certain date. In San Francisco, for example, the date is June 13th, 1979. In San Jose, my city, rent control is for apartments with 3 or 4 more units that were built and occupied prior to September 7th, 1979. And the maximum allowable rent increase is 5% in a 12-month period. At state level, on the other hand, cover those properties not covered by local regulations. In California, most single-family homes are exempt from any form of rent control under a 1995 state law called the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act and a new statewide rent and eviction control law, AB 1482, took place on January 1st, 2020. However, adding 1 or more ADUs to your existing single-family home could potentially cause the primary home to become subject to rent control. Think about this. The main house you have been living in is exempt from rent control as a single-family home. Then you add another unit to your property. So there are now multiple units in one lot. Therefore, the primary house will likely become subject to state or local rent control if rented out. For the newly constructed ADU, in this case, is exempt from rent control for 15 years under new construction exemption in AB 1482. But eventually, both units will fall under some form of rent control. If you as an owner stay at the primary house and rent an ADU out, based on current law, that ADU is exempt from state rent control for at least 15 years. However, that 15-year exemption is set to expire in 2030. So in reality, you have a maximum of 8 years if you build your ADU today in 2022. Also, one thing to bear in mind, California government has been expanding rent control laws to more and more properties, and it's not safe to assume that such exemption will last forever. To a lot of people, even with rent control, eventually one day, that additional income from an ADU stays as one of the best opportunities to add value to their property. Rent control can limit your future income potential. They don't prevent you from raising the rent to market rates after a vacancy. Adding an ADU to your property is a great investment, but it does have a lot of complication for being a landlord. We have a lot of overlapping state, county, and city laws that have created very confusing rent control laws for ADUs. Before getting started with the building process, I highly suggest you check with your local government to keep up with the rent control laws. Get advice from experienced professionals like real estate attorney before making the decision to build an ADU. Really think about the pros and the cons of adding an ADU, including rent and eviction control implications, which will be covered in a later video. I hope you find today's video helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I will see you next week. Thanks for watching.